After losing out on Carlos Santana, the Mariners may pivot away from looking at the first base market. We'll discuss that and more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, December 26, 2024. This is Titan Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we're talking about Ryan Divish's latest column in the Seattle Times, and specifically a note he had about the Mariners' first base situation after they lost out on Carlos Santana this past weekend. Plus, are the Mariners being patient, or is there inaction so far due to them misreading the market? And finally, Korean infielder Hye-seong Kim's decision is fast approaching, and the Mariners are apparently one of the three teams still seriously in on him. We'll get into all that in just a moment, but before we do, shout out to our title sponsor today, FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. So Ryan Divish wrote in an article a few days ago on the Seattle Times that after losing out on Carlos Santana, he basically confirmed the Ken Rosenthal report, by the way, about the contract that was offered to Santana being more guaranteed money, having a player option, all of that. That the Mariners may just pivot away from the first base market, roll with a platoon of Luke Raley and Tyler Locklear at first base, and then go out on the trade market and look for a second baseman or a third baseman. Not both, apparently, at least according to his sources. So we talked about this a little bit on our Patreon episode on Tuesday. So Colby, you've had a little more time to ruminate on this thing. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty stupid to count on Tyler Locklear to be anything more than a warm body at the end of your bench. Dude was bad last year, like legitimately bad. He had like a 40% strikeout rate in the big leagues. He wasn't really any good in AAA Tacoma, 103 WRC plus in the PCL. That's not great. He's got theoretical power, in-game power, but he hasn't really shown it. This isn't a guy who's hitting 30 bombs in the minors. So yeah, you're basically hoping upon hope that this guy is big league ready, despite literally zero evidence suggesting they are. And oh, by the way, the Mariners don't think Tyler Locklear was big league ready, or at least they didn't a month ago. And guess what? There's no new evidence that suggests he is. And the reason the Mariners thought that is because there was no discussion about Locklear being in the first base plans for 2025 before now. There was no thought that, hey, let's see if Ty Locklear can play third. Maybe he's a solution over there. None of that existed until now. So, yeah, the Mariners are full of it if they think that they're going to sell us on, oh, Locklear's ready to be in the big leagues when they didn't think he was a month ago.
Yeah, this is the first time we've heard Locklear's name legitimately dropped. Mm-hmm. And this is also the first time, even though this is something that you and I have talked about a lot, this is the first time we've heard someone like Ryan Divish actually mention Luke Raley as part of a potential first base solution. So, yeah, this is obviously not their first, second, or third plan. Or maybe it is. Maybe maybe they went into this offseason, Carlos Santana was their only plan.
Yeah, and by the way, that we didn't even talk about how stupid it is to have a guy on your team whose sole purpose is to play first base against left-handed pitching only. Like you're going to burn a bench spot on a guy who is going to play first base 50 times a year for you, and that's it. That's his whole role. Mm. That on top of everything else makes it even more stupid. And so, yeah, the idea like pivoting away from first base, I think is actually a fine idea. I've talked about this for the last week or so. Like you have a first baseman on your roster who is pretty darn good in Luke Raley. You don't need a first baseman. You need bats. You need to free up Luke Raley to be able to play first. So if Divish is telling us like, yeah, the Mariners are going to get a third baseman and an outfielder who's going to kind of rotate through the DH and play some corner outfield and whatnot. like, great. That makes a lot of sense. Rayleigh can play first. Boom, problem solved. But if you're going to waste a roster spot on Ty Locklear, you're not serious about winning in 2025. No shot.
No. So is the inaction from the Mariners so far an example of patience, or have they truly misread the market? We'll get into that a little bit more here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/LOCKEDON. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, talking about the Mariners' lack of action so far on the market, which has been a common topic on this show. It's 7 weeks now of recording this offseason, and they still haven't really done anything of substance. That's a lot of fun for us as content creators. So again, going back to the first base conversation, there's a lot of first basemen still out there. Mm-hmm. And Justin Turner is someone that they've outright said that they had interest in. But yeah, maybe the conversations that they've had with Turner's camp have changed their feelings on that after seeing what Goldschmidt got, after seeing what Santana got. So the market is a bit different than what they expected.
Right.
So
we think.
Right. So
apparently they were at the top of the market for Santana.
Which again kind of brings us back to the conversation of like, how much money do they really have? Because like
right
now the 2025 hit on Santana could be as low as like $8 million. And then the guarantee that takes it over 12 could be like a $5 million buyout on his player option. Something like that.
Right.
You know, it could be. I don't know if that is, but it could be. So maybe they weren't spending 80 to 85% of their budget on just Carlos Santana alone in 2025. Right.
Yeah.
Again, that's working off of the projection that's been floating out there.
Sure.
But if that is the case, if they were like floating, you know, $11-12 million in 2025 alone to Santana, maybe they have more than that $16 million to spend, right? So still, I look at the situation, I look at the information that we do have available to us from people that should be in the know, at least to a certain degree. I mean, obviously the Mariners aren't going to just outright tell anyone what their budget is. At least they shouldn't. Right, that does them no favors, having that information be publicly available. Right. But we can all take an educated guess, and you know the Adam Judes and the Daniel Kramers and the Shannon Drayers of the world would know more than anyone else of us would. So, yeah, you approach this market with potentially $16 to $20 million in one of the best farm systems in baseball, and so far it seems like most of the league, outside of like 3 or 4 teams, are going, we don't want your prospects. We don't want any prospects. Right. And then, so at that point, the meta is in the market, you got to go spend money. Mm-hmm. And if you only have $16 to $20 million and guys like Carlos Santana are making 12,
right,
then you can't do what you want to do.
Right. So
yeah. Do you think they misread the market, or do you think they are just being patient, kind of just laying in the cut, seeing what happens, seeing how things fall?
It's kind of tough to say because aside from Santana, I can't think of a single player that signed that the Mariners were linked to as anything more than probably leverage. Like Paul Goldschmidt signs like 18 hours after he's linked to the Mariners for the first time ever. All of a sudden he gets a deal done. Like, okay, Goldschmidt signs. Like Santana's the one guy who's been consistently linked to the Mariners all winter. We know they had interest in and signed somewhere else. Like he's the only guy so far that we know the Mariners had interest in and he went elsewhere. Now, part of that is because we just don't know all the guys the Mariners are interested in. I hope we don't, at least. But assuming we don't, then there's probably more guys that they like that are still available. Like I haven't seen a deal that was made that I looked at and been like, yeah, the Mariners like that guy, and they didn't get him. Very few deals where it's like, the Mariners should have beat that even if they didn't like the guy. Like there's the Jake Berger trade. Like, yeah, the Mariners probably should have been in on him at that price, even if they didn't love the player. But other than that, I mean, guys who have been linked to the Mariners pretty consistently, Hye-seong Kim, he's still out there. Roki Sasaki's still out there. Justin Turner's still out there. So it's a little tough to say.
Alec Boehm,
right.
Still out there.
Right. And it's not like it's not like the Mariners like offered Santana $6 million thinking that's all he was going to get. And then he got 12 from, no, they offered more than Cleveland.
Yeah.
And they offered a little bit more than Goldschmidt. So they were pretty much like right in the range that it was going to end up taking to get a guy like Santana. So I don't know. Maybe they misread the trade market thinking the prospects were going to be valuable. But again, like who's been traded for pure prospects? Jake Berger is it, really. Garrett Crochet too, but Crochet never going to be a Mariner. That wasn't going to be a thing. So,
well, and again, that's the White Sox. That's the Marlins.
Right. And those are teams that are two of the only teams, as far as I know, the only teams that are willing to take prospect-led packages for their players. There's just not a lot on either of those rosters either. So for all we know, at the beginning of the year, the Cardinals are going to be like, let's start talking some prospects here because we need to move guys off this roster, and big league trades for big league trades are hard. And why do we care if we win 84 games instead of 78 next year? What's the difference? Let's talk Brendan Donovan. Let's talk Helsley. Let's talk, Lars Nootbaar for prospects. So again, the market is still evolving, but it's tough for me to say that the Mariners misread it or if they're being patient because again, it's just like not a lot of their guys or the guys that we know they like have been removed from the market so far. So it's a little bit tough to say, but if I had to wager, I would say it's more misreading than it is patience.
Yeah. But I would say that seems to be true, at least in terms of the first base market. Again, if they're like, they wanted Santana, they were willing to go far with Santana, but maybe they're not willing to do the same for Justin Turner, who, again, they outwardly said, we have interest in bringing back. Yeah. So clearly something changed. Right. So if they are pivoting away from first base while Turner is still out there, then clearly something is different than what they expected.
Right. The most misreading the market is not the sin of the front office right now. Refusing to adapt to the market you misread and are now getting a clearer picture of, that would be devastating. Like it's one thing to go and thinking prices are going to be this, and it turns out they're actually this. Okay, like that's not great, but whatever. You misread it. What you can't do is be like, nope, we're going to wait for the market to be exactly what we thought it was going to be. Because you know what?
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Like the market changes, you have to adapt to it. So the Mariners still have time. They just have to accept the reality of the market that's in front of them and make their adjustments accordingly. They can't be so bullheaded that they have to just sit there and be like, well, the market doesn't do what we thought it was going to do. I guess we're just going to be out of luck, which is what, running a platoon of Rayleigh and Locklear would just be them like, we're not going to adjust to the market.
Can they adapt with what they have? That's really my concern now is like, look, outside of maybe Luis Castillo, but there's this report now from John Heyman today about like 20 minutes ago saying that they are frustrated with the offers that they've received so far on Castillo. But outside of Castillo, really, there isn't a major leaguer that I think they can trade that's ultimately going to help them get better in 2025.
I mean,
and
even
so
Castillo's a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, again, if they're frustrated by the offers they're getting, then clearly like they're not getting offers that they feel are going to make them better right now. So they don't have that really. If teams don't really want their prospects and they only have $16 to $20 million to spend, can they even afford to adapt?
My thing is that you better find a way to. At the end of the day, I don't care how hard it was. You've run out of excuses, right? You can't use the same excuse 3 years in a row. Can't. Sorry. So figure it out. Like we can't. There's nothing. What are we supposed to do? Trade for Lamont Wade to play first base? Yes. If that's the best you can do, yes, it is. What you want us to pay 130 cents on the dollar with prospects so we could just go get this guy? Yes, that's what you do. 2025 is the most important season, right? This one upcoming is more important than 2026. We talk about this all the time. You don't have to be reckless, but you do have to be aggressive. And so you have to adapt to the market. And again, like, hey, you know what? Not many teams are taking prospects. You know who is? The White Sox. Who do the White Sox have that could help you? Luis Robert Jr., but he doesn't play first base. Who cares? They're one of the teams that are.
You know who can play first base? Luke Raley. Well, he can stand there.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. Hey, the Marlins don't have a ton, but you know what they do have? They have Jesus Sanchez, an outfielder who can hit and run a little bit.
Yeah.
They have Jonah Bride, a guy who, had a 130 WRC plus last year. Like, they have some guys. They have they have Nardi, like, from the bullpen. Don't tell me that you can't go make trades with your prospects. You absolutely can, because I'm here to tell you that Garrett Crochet, that was not an overpay. None of the trades we've seen have been an overpay.
And frankly, this is a front office that has to have some sense of urgency here. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder if maybe they have been given assurances from ownership that, look, you're good. No matter what happens in 2025, you're good. You're here for 2026. But from the outside looking in, given what's happened the last 2 years, front office should be on the hot seat, at least a little bit. And right now, this doesn't seem like a front office that feels any sort of pressure. That feels like they're having to essentially fight for their jobs. So, again, still a lot of offseason go. They can do all their heavy lifting still. Like, there's plenty of time, and a lot of the guys that, we've heard them connected to, and we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about, are still out there. Yep. But yeah, right now it doesn't seem like they have the facilities essentially to get what they want to do across the finish line. And that to me is a little concerning. And it's also a little bit concerning about if they are able to adapt with the resources that they have at hand and what the meta of the market is right now.
I mean, yeah. To quote the great manager, Jim Halpert, you got to do something, man. You just can't sit there.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see. And also for us personally, we would like something to actually talk about, something real, like an actual signing or trade. That'd be fun. That'd be great for us. So, yeah. All right. We actually might have something to talk about here in the next week, though. Hye-seong Kim's deadline to sign with the team is coming up on, I believe, January 3rd. And apparently there are 3 teams that are very interested in him still. And that includes your Seattle Mariners. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So according to Korean news outlet YTN, Hye-seong Kim, the Korean fielder who's coming over from the KBO to Major League Baseball this offseason, is apparently getting strong interest from 3 teams: the Angels, the Padres, and your Seattle Mariners. Now, for a while, the Mariners were really the only team I had heard connected to Kim by national media. So the news of the Padres and the Angels is a bit new, at least to me. I don't know if that's new in general, but it is new to me. I know Mark Feinson reiterated a couple of weeks ago, like the Mariners are the team we're all hearing a lot about when it comes to Hye-seong Kim. And so, yeah, it seems that interest hasn't died as of yet. So Hye-seong Kim, it's a big risk. We've talked about it. We talked about him and Hye-seong Kim on an episode a couple of weeks ago, Colby. There's obviously a lot of interesting tools here. Highly athletic player, can play good defense, can make stuff happen on the bags, and he hits for contact. Or he has, at least in the KBO. But obviously, right. Major League Baseball, different animal than the KBO. Even though that the talent level has risen there, as well as in MPB over in Japan as well. So this could be a deal that pays huge dividends for a team like the Mariners, who, by all accounts, aren't planning on spending a lot of money this offseason. But it's also possible that they look at this guy as their answer at second base, and he's no better, if not worse, than the options they already have in house. Yeah. So, yeah, how do you feel about Hye-seong Kim now that we have a little bit more of a better picture of the offseason and where the market has landed and all that, and where the Mariners are right now, considering that, again, they still haven't done anything?
Yeah. Second baseman, pretty good one. Could also play short or third. He's a good defensive player. So, he gives you that. He's also a good base runner. He steals bags. So there is some floor here, but it's all about the bat, right? And we saw Hye-seong Kim come over, a much more hyped prospect than Hye-seong Kim, who, by the way, we're mispronouncing his name. We will get it right if he's a Mariner.
Sure.
If he goes back to Korea, which is a possibility, probably won't talk about him ever again until, he tries again. Yeah, it's all about money at this point, because what we heard earlier is that he wanted like $8 million, like when he first got posted a year, like he wanted basically Hye-seong Kim money. And based on what I had heard and what I had read and what I'd watched and what I had looked at in the numbers, I was like, no, I'm not willing to do that. So if he's a $4 to $5 million a year player, like fine, I think that's an okay risk to take. If he still wants 8, 9, 10, no, I'm not interested in that. I've watched, quite a few of his at-bats that I could find over the last couple of years. And most of his hits are either, flares over the shortstop's head, or they are ground balls between the second and first baseman. There's not a lot of pop here. So, now he has had 40 or more extra base hits each of the last 2 years. So that's good. And he's definitely got the speed where if he puts one in the gap, he'll take the extra base often. So it's an intriguing profile, like super, super poor man's Ichiro is like what you're dreaming of, but there's not a lot of power here, less than even Ichiro, over the fence power. But he plays second base pretty good, steal 20 bags if he gets on base enough. That's the thing though. He's probably going to have to walk a little bit more, because a lot of his on-base percentage in Korea was produced by a high batting average. Not that he doesn't walk. I think he's like 9-10%. But if that drops, which it probably will, because obviously Major League pitching is much better than it is in the KBO, then, and he's only going to hit 250, 300, like 330 is not an effective slash line. Unless you are a premier defensive second baseman, which I don't know if he's that good, but he's pretty good. So yeah. I think for me, my interest in Kim and what I'm hoping he eventually is that he just kind of replaces Dylan Moore in the long term. And he's that kind of that super utility guy who you can move around. But there's a chance that he could be an average bat right away. And if he is an average bat with his defense and his base running, he's probably a 3-win player.
Yeah, I mean, could he at the very least be a poor man's left-handed version of Nico Horner? Who it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to get now.
That feels like the ceiling of him. And again, keep in mind, Hye-seong Kim, much more, hype prospect, came over and he really struggled in year one in the big leagues. Jung-Hoo Lee didn't really get a shot. We don't really know how his first year would have gone. He got hurt too early. But yeah, it's not a layup anymore. The KBO is a step down from the MPB, and obviously the MPB is a step down from the majors. But
yeah,
so yeah, it's a little bit tough for me because, like I said, I can only watch highlights that are posted. I don't get to watch KBO games to kind of get a feel for all that. But based on what I know from the numbers, he makes a lot of contact. He draws a fair amount of walks. But most of his on-base skill comes from his ability to make contact, put the ball in play, and run. And so if that takes a hit, then his on-base takes a hit. We know the power's not going to play up. It's not going to get better at the big leagues. So it's a risk. So I'm at $4 or $5 million. And then you give him a shot to be the everyday second baseman. Fine. I think if you're going to do that, then you have to have like an answer at third base, or you have to even have that big bat outfielder. You can't be the best position player you bring in this winter.
No. Because I would probably put him in the same group as I put Ryan Bliss and Austin Shenton and any other like fringe major leaguer on the Mariners 40-man roster who might factor in at third or second or first base for them this year. Like, I'm not looking at Hye-seong Kim in some higher tier than that right now. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But with what I know about the guy and what I know about players that have come from the KBO over to Major League Baseball, particularly in their first year, I don't look at him as like, oh, yeah, there we go. We got our second baseman.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody who's like watched Kim like consistently who thinks that he'll hit the ground running at the major league level. Like, I just don't think he's that type of prospect, and that's what he is. He's a prospect that you have to pay major league money to. It is interesting that the three teams that are linked to him right now, they're all on the West Coast, but the Mariners are probably the only team that can say to Kim, like, you want to play every day? Like, here you go. Second base is yours.
Yeah.
You're going to get the opportunity to play every day at second base. San Diego, not really. I think it was mentioned in the article that San Diego's interest in him was more as a utility player. And then the Angels, who knows with the Angels? So, yeah, we'll see. I think for me, like, if I could get him on like a 3 or 4 year deal worth about $5 million AAV, maybe I can even backload that a little bit. So his hit in year one is only $2 million. And then we can kind of see what he is as a big leaguer over the next year or two. I think that's interesting. You start talking, 4 and 24, 4 and 30, like, no, I don't think that makes a lot of sense for the Mariners based on where they sit right now.
Yeah. And that also kind of goes back to the conversation that we just had. Like, how much money do they really have? How desperate are they willing to get, which isn't really something that we talked about, but I mean, 12 plus million in guaranteed money to Carlos Santana, 39-year-old first baseman. That seems kind of desperate to me.
Mm-hmm. Basically,
so like
guaranteed 2 years.
And if they think Kim is the only thing they can do at second base this offseason, how desperate are they willing to get?
Right. So, when we talked about this, it's one of those things where it's like, you want to be aggressive, but you can't be reckless. And I think Kim is one of those players where you have the potential for the Mariners to get reckless rather than aggressive. And Kim is not the guy to get reckless on because, like you said, honestly, if you're like who's going to be a better player in 2025, Dylan Moore or Hye-seong Kim, Dylan Moore is where the smart money would go.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, Kim offensively does profile well for the philosophy the Mariners have kind of laid out under, Edgar and now Kevin Seitzer and Bobby Magallanes. It's a contact approach, staying up the middle. That's what Kim does bring to the table or has brought to the table in the KBO. So he does fit in that regard. It's no surprise why the Mariners would have interest in him and in a profile like Hye-seong Kim's. But, Yeah, it's a pretty big risk, especially if he's going to be one of the significant additions of your offseason. If not, I mean, maybe at this point, the most significant addition you make this offseason. So, yeah. So we'll have an answer on that pretty quick here, I would think, probably within the next week. Because, again, I believe his deadline to sign with the team is January 3rd. Yep. So we'll see. All right. So that's going to do it for our show. We'll be back tomorrow for Fan Fiction Friday. We'll have the tweet out so you can submit your trades on our Twitter. So head on over there if you have a trade idea to give us. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby, Patnode, I'm Tiding Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tiding Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.